Most of the videos in this series have been about adding functionality to your panels, but I want to talk a bit about how to make your panels look nicer and adding some style. I have a series of tips on how to do that. I have a panel here and we're just going to apply some styles to it. The first tip I want to talk about is Snap to Grid. If you're in Panel Builder mode and you right-click, there's an option for Snap to Grid. Let's not turn it on yet. Let's put down a few labels. So, label 1. I'm going to try and make them line up. Label 2. And label 3. Now, as much as I try, if I go out of Panel Builder mode, they're not exactly lined up, and it's hard to do just by eyeballing it. If I go back into Panel Builder mode and I do Snap to Grid, when I put down some elements, it'll snap to that grid. So if I can say label 4 and label 5. You'll see that they're now lined up vertically here, that these two labels are exactly at the same place, and it looks much nicer. And in fact, once you have Snap to Grid on, as soon as you move any element, it'll snap it to the grid as well. So now all of these elements are nicely lined up without much effort. My second tip is to use containers wherever you can. Never put anything on the top level canvas of your panel. Always put it within a container of some sort. And there's different reasons for that. One, it makes it easier to move things that go together. And secondly, you can style them so that you can easily see the containers. For example, Screen 1 and Screen 2 are both inside of these canvases. I could double click on the canvas and give them a style, like a background color. And that instantly puts it so that everything that's Screen 1 is visibly together. So it makes it easier to identify what goes with what. Which brings us to my third tip, which is to use spacing. If I give this one a style as well with the same background color, now it's no longer clear what goes with what. But if I add a bit of spacing into this simple grid that's containing both these canvases, add some horizontal space between them, it's much easier to see what goes with Screen 1 and what goes with Screen 2. So keep elements that go together and add some spacing between the elements that don't go together. My next tip is to use Define Styles. If I go into Panel Builder mode, double click anywhere, and then go to the top level apps, I can click on the Style button here to define some styles. I'm going to start by defining one for my headers. So I'm going to give it a name and an ID. And I'm going to decide what my headers should look like. So perhaps I'm going to pick a background color like this muted blue. And I'm going to say that the font size should be big and the foreground color should be white. And perhaps I want the insets to be over a little bit, so top of 0, left of 15, 0, 0. Apply and close. Now that on its own didn't do anything. I've defined a style for headers, but I haven't applied it to any of my headers. So let's go into this label here, go to Style, get rid of any style it currently has, and then go down to the bottom and pick a defined style of headers. Apply and close, and you can see that it has now applied that style to that header. And I can do the same thing with this header. So go to Style, get rid of any that it already has, and go to Headers, apply and close. So now all of my headers look the same, and if ever I want to change my headers, I can just go into it, double click anywhere, go to the top. Inside of my meta section, we'll find the styles I've defined. And I could decide I don't want that selected blue, I want them to be orange. Apply and close. And now all of my headers automatically change. So I can do this for headers, for buttons, for backgrounds, for pretty much everything. And then that way, if I want to change how my panel looks, I only have to change 4 or 5 different styles. I don't have to change it everywhere. The next tip is adding a logo to your panel. I'm going to go into Panel Builder mode, and you can use either a basic canvas or a label. Either one works. I'm going to use a label. I'm going to drop it where I want my logo, and then hit OK. Then I'm going to double click on it, go to Style, and change the background, and pick the logo that I want. Once you have your logo, you can resize it to the size that you want and place it where you want. The next few tips I have all revolve around using background images for different things. I often get questions about using different fonts inside of your dashboard panel. Now, Dashboard has two different fonts right now. It has the standard font, and you can go to Style and pick either bold or monospaced font. But unfortunately, you're limited to those three different styles of fonts within your dashboard panel. If you want to use a different font, then you have to start using images. I also get questions about having backgrounds with gradients or having backgrounds that have a different shape to them other than square or just square with little rounded corners, which is what we can do in Dashboard. Again, your only option there is to use images. You can use any graphic package you want to make these images. I used Inkscape to make a couple of header images. So let's apply one of them to this label here. So I'm going to go to Style. I'm going to get rid of the Define Style. I'm going to go to Background. And I'm going to pick the image I created. Now, because I'm using an image, I don't need the actual font on top as well. So I can double click on it and get rid of the actual text. Apply and close and close. And let's get rid of the background color here. Background color. And you can see I now have a header that has a different shape. It has kind of a slanted edge and a rounded edge, and it has a font that's not typically seen within Dashboard. If you do want to use a font that's similar to the Dashboard font, Dashboard uses Open Sans font. So if you can find that one, you can make images that have a similar font to what's in Dashboard. So let's do the same thing with the second screen. Go to Style, remove the Define Style, and then just go to the background image, browse, and pick the second one that I created. Apply and close. We'll get rid of the text, and we'll get rid of the background color. And now I have a panel with two nice headers on them. You can do the same thing if you want a gradient. I made a version of this main screen that has a gradient. So if I go to Style, change the image to one with a gradient, you can see I now have a gradient on that label. And you can make images for different things. I made an image for this background here, so I can go to Style, pick a background, and we'll pick this background here. Open and close. And in this other panel, I kept going with this style. I gave it a background image with these rays. I made these canvases semi-transparent so you could see the rays through the canvases. I also made my header so it has a straight edge as opposed to a slanted edge. I found that looked nicer. But this is the type of thing you can do with background images. I've also seen some facilities use background images in an interesting way. They will take a picture of their facility and then use it as the background of their panel. And then they can overlay their controls over top of that image so that it's obvious what parts of the production you're actually controlling. So if you have three screens like a left, right, and main, well, you can overlay them over top of an image of that screen. Makes it easier for a volunteer or someone who doesn't have a lot of experience to figure out what is controlling what. You can also use this idea of using background images and overlaying controls on them to give your panels a certain style. For example, I made an image like this using Inkscape, and then I imported it into my panel, used it as the background of one of my canvases, and then moved over some of my elements so that they fit within the black space. And it gives it kind of a Star Trek-y futuristic look. It also allows me to have words that are sideways. So using different styles, you can take a panel that looks like this, and you can make something that's totally red if you prefer red. Or if that's way too bright for you, then you can go to something blue and change the colors and adapt them to what you like. Or if you want gradients, then you can start adding in background images with different gradients. And you can really customize the panel to look the way you want.